Eddie Mathews wasn't just a great slugger. He was the purest form of raw, unfiltered power the game of baseball had ever seen. When he stepped into the batter's box, there was a certain tension in the air, a quiet warning that something violent was about to happen. His stance was coiled aggression, his swing a thunderous whip that snapped through the zone with such force that even pitchers claimed they could feel it through their fingertips when the ball exploded off his bat. He wasn't flashy, he didn't crave the spotlight. But every time that unmistakable crack echoed across the stadium, everyone, fans, pitchers, even teammates, knew exactly who had just spoken. Eddie Mathews didn't need theatrics. The sound of his bat was enough. And then there's the moment that cements his place in baseball's mythology, becoming the only player in MLB history to hit more than 500 home runs for the same franchise across 3 different cities: Boston, Milwaukee, and Atlanta. No one else has ever done it. No one else probably ever will. He carried a franchise through eras, through relocations, through entire generations of fans. And he did it with the same terrifying, effortless power. Yet somehow in today's conversations about the greatest hitters, his name so often drifts into the background, overshadowed by louder legends and bigger stories. How can someone be so powerful, yet so overlooked in today's baseball conversations? Eddie Mathews was born in Texarkana, Texas, a small town where life was simple, work was hard, and dreams were something you built with your own hands. His family came from a blue-collar world, people who understood effort, sweat, and the value of doing things the right way, even when no one was watching. When Eddie was still young, the Mathews family moved west to California, hoping for better opportunities. But the world he grew up in was far from easy. It was the era of World War II, a time when rationing, uncertainty, and sacrifice shaped the rhythm of everyday life. For many kids, these years were filled with chores and responsibility. For Eddie, they were also filled with baseball. Not the polished version seen in stadiums, but the dusty, improvised kind played on empty lots and makeshift fields. Those dirt patches became his sanctuary. He spent countless hours there, swinging at anything he could find: rocks, rubber balls, even rolled up paper, anything that could fly far enough to challenge him. His strength wasn't a gift, it was something he built. Eddie helped with heavy labor around the house, carried equipment, pushed carts, and did whatever a kid could do to help. Every bit of that work forged power in his hands and forearms, and every spare moment he was throwing, hitting, repeating the same motion until it felt like a second heartbeat. Coaches and neighbors began to notice something unusual. Whenever Eddie swung, the ball didn't just travel, it disappeared. By his early teens, he could hit farther than boys several years older. People in the town whispered about the kid with the grown man power, the one who could send a ball sailing beyond any fence drawn in the dirt. Even before he understood what destiny meant, the game was already choosing him. By the time Eddie Mathews reached high school, his reputation had already spread far beyond the neighborhood sandlots. Coaches didn't just see a strong kid, they saw a phenomenon. Scouts from the Boston Braves began hearing stories about a left-handed hitter who could launch balls into places no teenager had any business reaching. When they finally saw him in person, the legend matched the truth. His swing was raw but terrifying, a blend of natural power and years of unpolished repetition. The Braves signed him straight out of high school, convinced they were witnessing the birth of something rare. But the path to the majors was anything but smooth. In the minor leagues, Eddie entered a world where pitchers were older, craftier, and eager to humble a rising star. The fastballs came in harder, the curveballs broke sharper, and the expectations were enormous. Mathews struggled at times, not because he lacked talent, but because he needed to learn how to harness it. Coaches pushed him relentlessly, reshaping his timing and tightening his swing. And Eddie responded the only way he knew: by working. Extra hours in the cage, extra rounds of fielding practice, extra days staying after workouts when everyone else had gone home. The grind paid off. His power translated quickly, and by 1952, the Braves knew they couldn't keep him hidden any longer. When he debuted in the majors that spring, he wasn't the polished superstar fans later remembered. He was a teenager facing the best pitchers in the world, trying to find his place under stadium lights he had only imagined from faraway radio broadcasts. There were strikeouts, moments of doubt, and nights when the game felt impossibly fast. But every so often, there was also that sound, the unmistakable crack of a Mathews swing connecting cleanly with a ball. And when it happened, players on both teams turned their heads because even then, the ball didn't just travel, it took flight. The minors had taught him discipline, the majors would teach him greatness, and the journey from raw talent to true power hitter was only just beginning. Eddie Mathews didn't simply arrive in 1953, he erupted. After a rookie season spent learning the rhythms of the big leagues, Mathews stepped into his second year with a sharpened swing, a stronger body, and a quiet confidence that bordered on inevitability. Pitchers who thought they understood him quickly realized they had underestimated what was coming. That season, the baseball world witnessed a transformation. The teenager with raw talent became the fearsome left-handed force who would define an era. It began with small signs, line drives that carried farther than they should, opposite field shots that hinted at growing mastery. And then the floodgates opened. Mathews launched 47 home runs, the most in Major League Baseball, at just 21 years old. It wasn't merely impressive, it was astonishing. No one that young was supposed to dominate so violently, so consistently. Every stadium he visited felt the sting of his power. Opposing managers adjusted their defenses. Pitchers altered their sequences. None of it mattered. His swing, once rough and unpredictable, had become a controlled explosion. He kept his hands tight, unleashed his hips at the perfect moment, and struck the ball with a blend of precision and fury rarely seen from a player his age. Veterans shook their heads. Fans stood up before the ball even landed. Writers struggled to find words capable of capturing what they were witnessing. And then quietly but unmistakably, a new identity began to emerge in baseball circles. Eddie Mathews, the man pitchers feared. This wasn't hype. This wasn't projection. It was the simple truth. When he stepped into the box, bullpens stirred, catchers braced themselves, and outfielders instinctively backed up another few steps. This 1953 breakout didn't just announce a star, it announced a generational force. The league would adapt, pitchers would adjust, strategies would evolve, but nothing could change the reality that Eddie Mathews had arrived as one of the most devastating power hitters the sport had ever known. From the mid-1950s to the early 1960s, Eddie Mathews didn't just perform at a high level, he ruled the National League with a consistency and ferocity that only a handful of players in baseball history have ever matched. This was the period when his name became synonymous with power, fearlessness, and the unmistakable thundering sound of a baseball being struck with absolute authority. Between 1953 and 1961, Mathews delivered one of the greatest extended peaks the sport has ever seen. Year after year, the numbers piled up. Seasons of 30, 40, even 46 home runs. On-base percentages that reflected discipline beyond his years. Slugging percentages that placed him among the elite. And an OPS that consistently lived in territory reserved for only the game's most feared hitters. In those 9 seasons, he finished in the top 10 of MVP voting 6 times, an astonishing display of sustained excellence. But numbers alone don't capture the full impact of Eddie Mathews. What truly elevated him into baseball mythology was the presence he carried every time he stepped onto the field. Pitchers admitted they altered their entire game plans when facing him. Some refused to throw inside, others tried to tempt him with breaking balls in the dirt. Most failed. His ability to punish mistakes was unmatched, but even well-executed pitches weren't always safe. Mathews had the rare ability to turn a pitcher's best pitch into his own highlight. And then there was his partnership with Hank Aaron, a duo that remains one of the most devastating offensive pairings in MLB history. While Aaron was elegance and precision, Mathews was raw electricity. Together, they anchored the Braves lineup and carried the franchise to its greatest triumph, the 1957 World Series championship. In that postseason, Mathews delivered crucial moments, including a powerful home run that shifted momentum and etched his name into championship lore. Those who played alongside him spoke of a leader who didn't need to shout. He led with work ethic, with toughness, with a sense of responsibility that resonated deeply in the clubhouse. Warren Spahn once said that Mathews hit baseballs as if he were angry at them, a description that perfectly captured both his physical strength and his competitive nature. Even Mickey Mantle, a rival for the crown of the era's greatest slugger, regarded Mathews with profound respect. Defensively, he was no liability. At third base, one of the toughest positions in the sport, Mathews displayed surprising quickness, strong instincts, and an arm powerful enough to erase would-be hits with ease. In an era where third basemen were rarely offensive juggernauts, he redefined what the position could be. This stretch of dominance wasn't fleeting. It was a marathon of excellence, a near decade in which Eddie Mathews stood firmly among the best hitters alive. Stadiums braced for him. Pitchers dreaded him. Fans paid just to watch him unleash that violent, breathtaking swing. As the 1960s unfolded, the game began to test Eddie Mathews in ways far different from the challenges of his youth or the pressure of his prime. For nearly a decade, he had stood as one of the most feared hitters in baseball, a left-handed titan capable of changing a game with a single violent swing. But even legends eventually meet the limits of the human body. For Mathews, those limits arrived quietly, first as aches, then as nagging pains, and finally as undeniable signs that greatness always comes with a cost. Shoulder issues crept in, sapping the explosive torque that had once sent baseballs screaming over distant fences. His knees, worn down from years of playing the demanding third base position, began to stiffen and slow. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single defining injury. It was the slow erosion of physical dominance that every longtime athlete eventually confronts. And for someone who had built his identity on power, feeling that power fade was a deeply personal heartbreak. Pitchers sensed the change. The same inside fastballs he used to demolish were suddenly harder to turn on. Breaking balls he once punished now found edges of the zone that his bat reached just a fraction too late. The numbers dipped, the headlines faded, but Mathews didn't retreat. He fought. He adjusted his approach, leaned on discipline, and found ways to contribute even when the bat felt heavier. Teammates noticed how he pushed through pain that would have sidelined others, refusing to surrender to decline. Off the field, he carried the weight of expectations from fans who still remembered the 40 home run seasons and the thunderous crack that once defined him. Then came another emotional blow. The Braves, the franchise he had carried across 3 cities, made the difficult decision to move on. For the first time in his career, Mathews found himself wearing a different uniform, leaving behind the team that had shaped both his triumphs and his heartbreaks. But what defined Eddie Mathews wasn't the fall, it was the courage to keep going. Even in the twilight of his career, he continued to give everything he had left, because the game had chosen him long before the world knew his name. When the dust finally settled on Eddie Mathews' career, the numbers alone were enough to carve his name into baseball eternity. 512 home runs, 8 seasons of 30 or more, a World Series championship, 2 league home run titles, and a resume that placed him firmly among the greatest third basemen in the history of the sport. But to understand Mathews' true legacy, you have to look far beyond the statistics printed on the back of a baseball card. Mathews wasn't just a slugger, he was a redefining force. Before him, third base was largely a defensive position, a place for reliable gloves and steady arms. Mathews shattered that mold, proving a third baseman could be the most dangerous bat in any lineup. His influence trickled through generations. Mike Schmidt, arguably the greatest at the position, openly credited Mathews for showing what was possible. Chipper Jones, another Braves legend, grew up idolizing him and carried his spirit into the modern era. In every powerful left-handed swing since, there is a trace of Eddie Mathews. His legacy also lives in the franchise he helped carry through 3 different cities: Boston, Milwaukee, and Atlanta. No other player in MLB history has ever hit 500-plus home runs for a single franchise as it moved across the map. That unique distinction isn't just a trivia fact, it symbolizes his unwavering presence through shifting eras, changing fan bases, and evolving identities. Wherever the Braves went, Eddie Mathews was the constant, a cornerstone, a bridge, a living heartbeat of the team. But the meaning of Mathews extends beyond baseball. He represented a rare duality, immense power wrapped in humility. He didn't chase cameras or headlines. He didn't cultivate an image or a persona. He simply worked, played hard, and let the crack of his bat tell his story. In a world that often values noise over substance, Mathews stood as a reminder that greatness doesn't need to shout. Even today, players who never saw him play speak of his legend with reverence. Coaches show clips of his swing to young hitters, learning the fundamentals of power mechanics. Historians point to his career as a model of consistency, durability, and discipline. And Braves fans across 3 eras, 3 cities, and 3 generations still speak his name with a sense of pride reserved only for those who shape the soul of a franchise. So when conversations arise about the greatest hitters of all time, and Eddie Mathews' name isn't mentioned as quickly as it should be, a question lingers in the air, quiet but undeniable. Can baseball ever produce another force of nature like Eddie Mathews? In the end, the story of Eddie Mathews is not just the story of a power hitter. It is the story of a young boy from Texarkana who turned empty lots into training grounds, who shaped his strength through hard work long before stadium lights ever found him, and who carried a franchise across 3 cities with nothing more than his bat, his grit, and his unshakable dedication to the game he loved. His journey began in dust and uncertainty, rose into one of the greatest peaks baseball has ever witnessed, and concluded with a legacy that still resonates through generations of players and fans. Even now, the echo of his swing lingers in the memories of those who saw him play and in the dreams of those who wish they had. Eddie Mathews reminds us that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it is steady, humble, and forged through years of relentless effort. As you look back on his career, its triumphs, its heartbreaks, its unforgettable power, what moment stands out most to you? Was it the 47 home run explosion of 1953, the championship run in 1957, or perhaps the simple image of a player who never backed down from the weight of expectation? Share your favorite memory or your first impression of Eddie Mathews in the comments. And if this journey through baseball history moved you, consider liking the video, sharing it with another baseball fan, and exploring the other stories waiting on our channel. For more tales of legends who shaped the soul of the sport, stay with us and keep the spirit of baseball alive.